The other thing that really struck me across the projects was how much work it is to gather data in emerging markets. So, Anna, you mentioned Project Orbit. Can you just quickly speak about some of the strategies you had to use to get data?
All right.
Other than her beautiful smile, which I must say, when Becky said to me, how did Anna manage to get this data, my friend who wrote the final chapter, I'm like, have you seen her smile?
It worked, Helena, in some cases. The smile really worked, because you need to smile even when they refuse you. So Project Orbit, as I mentioned, was conceptualized to understand business and management in Africa. So we wanted to look at several African countries. So we ended up with 5 African countries. So we looked at, we started off with Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Nigeria. And we attempted to do a South African study, but our data was already saturated, and there was access issues that we encountered. So it was incredibly hard to access some of the big companies in South Africa. So Project Orbit wanted to really understand what are those practices that managers will employ to manage their businesses. And we wanted to understand, as I mentioned, South African multinational companies that are operating in other African countries, and then European multinational companies and local champions in the African countries that we visited. For example, in Kenya, would look at what are the Kenyan firms that are internationalizing to the neighboring countries. So that was our key focus. And we also diversified our sample, looking at businesses in finance, in retail, and in agribusiness, because we really wanted to have diversity of our sample. And we went a step further in terms of who are the people that we want to talk to. And we looked at CEOs or managing directors. Then we had human resource managers and operations managers, including finance managers, all of them at C-level management. So that actually gave us to more than 100 interviews with C-level executives in these countries that I've mentioned. So that is a lot of data, and that is just a lot of hearing of how people run their businesses. And Helena joined us in one of the projects in Zimbabwe for one of the companies that I know you know about it, if you've listened to her very well. So she joined us in Zimbabwe to collect data. So it was really hard, first of all, to secure interviews from South Africa. And we had mapped out the companies that we wanted to visit, so that was quite clear. And we thought that by just calling and telling them, I'm calling from the best business school in Africa, then they'll say, yes, come the next day, we are ready for you. So that strategy did not work. So they said, you are in Joburg, interesting. We know South Africans to have the big brother attitude. So you think that you can research us in Johannesburg? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm just trying to secure an appointment and I will come to you. So the design of our study was for us to visit the African countries, and I'm glad that GIBS gave us the budget to do that, because if we thought that we were going to do the interviews online, it wasn't going to work. And so for every country that we visited, so I'll have a list of companies that I've identified. And before leaving, I'd actually call every single one of them and then try to make appointments and give report to Helena and say, these are the companies. But guess how many companies would agree before leaving? It will be 2 companies. And Helena will be like, that's good enough for us to go. 2 is better than nothing. So that will be good enough for us to go. So then just on the basis that someone said yes, just one person. And by that time, you're talking to the secretary who said yes, by the way, on behalf of the manager. So actually, you don't have the appointment from the manager. So then that meant that we had to plan our data collection carefully. The first week in all of these countries that we visited was really about negotiating access. That's where I had to smile. I'm not sure about the ethics of that. So the first week is really about familiarizing yourself with the context, because things are different out there. So you cannot go to Nigeria and think that the first day when you walk into an office building, they'll say, yes, we've been waiting for you. You have an interesting story to tell. No, it doesn't work like that. So you need to visit all the companies that you've scheduled and show your face and tell them how wonderful this project is and how it's going to change the world of academia. And by that time, they don't really understand what you say. So you need to talk about something tangible, because the CEOs are like, yeah, after doing this, we will write papers that we're going to share with you. And these are in the form of white papers that you'll be able to read and implement in your business. So that strategy worked in some places where I had to show my face, but in other places, they wouldn't even allow me to come, even though I was in Zimbabwe or even though I was in Botswana, because I was calling using my South African number. Then they see, oh, it's a South African line. They're like, we're not available. So then we went to Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe was incredibly hard. Helena spoke about the challenges of collecting data in Zimbabwe. And fortunately, one of our colleagues referred to us to one of her doctoral students who graduated from another institution, who was a central point or an important connector in our context. So when I went to Zimbabwe, the first few days, I spent time with him, just driving around, trying to see the culture and how people actually live, for me to understand how I need to show up for this data gathering sessions. And in the process, I told him my challenges of reaching out to companies. And he says, no, you can't suffer when I am here. So then this person happened to work in the Ministry of Finance. And in Zimbabwe, they really love finance. Like, the Ministry of Finance is so important, because back in the days in 2018, when we collected the data, they will have one regulation passed today in the morning, and in the afternoon is something else. So hearing from the Ministry of Finance was like top of agenda for all executives. Then he tells me, how about you come to my office, we sit down the whole day, and then you pretend you are from the Ministry of Finance so that you can get the interviews. I'm like, I am for that plan. So then I go to his office. So the first few days, I'm just like, because I don't know, you need the local, right, to give you access. Then we go to his office. And then I was introduced to the secretary, and then the guy then said, okay, she's going to do the introductions, and she will call, and then you will talk if there is a need for you to talk, because you don't want to spoil the opportunity. So, because when they called, they would say, oh, this is Ministry of Finance calling. Then whoever that we want to talk to, the company, because it's Ministry of Finance calling, they answer the phone. You see a huge difference from my South African mobile not going through to the local. And then they'll say, yeah, we have South African delegation. I am the delegation, by the way. So then they're like, we have South African delegation wanting to talk to you. And then they're like, oh, okay, we are available. Do you know what is it about? They're like, it's about this big project, Orbit, and they really want to talk to your executives. And if they ask additional questions, that is when I'll come in and then talk. But if not, I leave it there because I don't want to spoil the opportunity. And that strategy worked, right? Mm-hmm. So all the companies agreed. But then when I showed myself to the companies, they're like, where is the South African delegation? Because they were expecting to see. And back in the days, I looked so young. Nevertheless, they agreed to participate in our study because of the local connection that we had. And Zimbabwe actually happened to be a country where we collected a lot of interviews. We ended up having a lot of interviews. And most of our theorizing projects are actually from Zimbabwe. So can you imagine, had it not been of that guy and agreeing to sit in the minister's office and making up the calls, we wouldn't have had the data that we had.